Hello, once again, a warm welcome to all of you, our valued attendees, and especially our distinguished resource person. We would like to welcome you to the 6-day National Online Workshop on Teaching of English, organized by the Center for Pre-Service Teacher Education under the PMM and MTT, School of Education, Nehu, Shillong, Meghalaya, the Altai Meghalaya chapter, Shillong, Meghalaya, and St. Anthony's College, Shillong, Meghalaya. We have another wonderful session today. Today is the 5th day of our 6-day National Online Workshop on Teaching of English, and we are very delighted to be able to bring to you another session of learning and of exchange of ideas. And we have with us Professor T.K. Karbaman. You know her already. We have introduced her to you, but in case you have just joined us today, we would like to introduce She's also the head of the Department of English Language Education at the university in the Shillong campus. She's also the president of the English Language Teachers Association of India, Meghalaya chapter. So without further ado, our resource person today will be addressing the topic of an interactive approach to pedagogy. Personally, it is a very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot from her today. So without further ado, I would like to invite our resource person, Professor T.K. Karbaman, to take the session. Over to you, ma'am, and warm welcome to our session today. Thank you. Please unmute. Yes.
Thank you, Jacob. A very good afternoon. And once again, I take this opportunity to thank the sponsors and the organizers, and particularly St. Anthony's College for allowing us to have this platform for the National Workshop for Teachers. And I believe the last 4 days has been really meaningful for each one of you. You have learned, and you are continuing to learn and reflect again on what you have learned and put them all into practice. So thank you again, Jacob. Thank you for the sponsors in Anthony's College and of course, Altai. Now, this afternoon session will be something that perhaps we have all been doing, but we've not had a nomenclature for it. But we have been doing it in the process of our teaching. We have been doing it, but the formal nomenclature for this will be the interactive approach to pedagogy. And of course, when we talk about interactive approach to pedagogy, it can be meant, of course, for English teachers, but it can also be meant for all languages, for all subjects across the curriculum. So it is not limited to English alone, but if some of the teachers who are participants in this program are teaching other disciplines as well, you can also apply this particular approach to whatever subjects you are teaching. So as I said, again, it is not limited to English alone. So good afternoon, the participants. I hope this session with you again will be an interesting learning session, something that you can reflect and go back and implement them in your daily teachings every day. I would have to apologize because I have an online meeting with the Vice Chancellor at about 5:30 in the evening, so I would have to leave the workshop a little early to get ready for the meeting. So I will be leaving my email will be on the screen. And if there's anything you should need elaboration or should need clarification, please do not hesitate to send me a mail. I will always reply to your mail. So again, we will not have a very long and exciting session this evening because, as I said, I will have to leave a little early. But I hope whatever we can share within this 1 hour will be relevant to you and to everyone. So I shall share the screen. Now, what is that? Jacob, can you see it, please? Jacob?
Yes, ma'am. It is visible. Okay. We can see it.
So I call it an interactive approach to pedagogy. And we all understand what is the meaning of interactive. It is not a one-way communication as we talked about last time, but it is a responsive, a participative, approach to pedagogy. So that is what we're going to try and discuss this afternoon. Now, before we go into this, as I said, it is not meant for English teachers only. It is across the discipline. But we have to learn a little bit about the concepts of teaching. So we have, first of all, an approach, which is an umbrella term. And below the approach, we have the method which follows the approach. And of course, after the methods, we have the actual techniques and the strategies that a classroom teacher employs or uses in order to carry out a method, which is in synchronization with an approach. So we have to remember that to every learning, there is an approach, whether we teach history or sociology or geography or even any language for that matter. We have to remember that there is an approach which we have to follow. That approach will guide us with the methods, and the methods will direct the classroom teacher as how to go about it. Remember, my dear participants, that I always believe in two types of syllabuses. One is the syllabus that has been given to us by the authorities, but I also believe in a real syllabus. A real syllabus takes place within the classroom proper. That means we have, as teachers, the ability to modify, to redefine, to change a little bit, to supplement a little bit of what we had been given as a syllabus by the authorities. So we have to understand these concepts. And of course, the theory of learning, it can be whatever approach we follow. I apologize if we have teachers from other disciplines, but we have what is called the conditioning type of learning, where, you know, we give the learners the information, the inputs, and they receive it. It's just like an urn, it's just like a vessel. So we are the informants, and the students receive the inputs that we give them as teachers. Now, in that situation, the learners have no role to play. They receive the inputs, but they cannot give us back. They cannot give us their feedback, because they're just supposed to be taking down the information and the inputs. They are passive recipients, we call it. So whether it's history or sociology or the sciences or even language, there is this particular theory of learning where we are conditioning learners to accept the information. There is another theory of learning which looks at the importance of our thought processes, that we give the children the inputs, and they, with their ability to understand, to process the information, come up with the output. I will not delay on this, because we need some more time if we have to elaborately discuss on the theory of learning. But I will just summarize it for you, that one is the theory of conditioning a person to receive the information, and the other one is allowing the recipients to kindly digest and process the information, the inputs received into their minds, into their intellect, into their cognitive processes, modifying them, monitoring upon them, and of course, we get the output. That is another theory of learning. Now, when it comes to language, I always tell my students that language is not just about knowing the grammar, knowing the structure. There are three theories to language. One is language as a system of structures. So we start with the sounds and the words and the sentence and meaning. That is one theory of language. But there's another theory of language which talks about language as communication. And we talked about that in the earlier session that I had taken with you, where language is used as one of the mediums of communication. So language is communication, and also language as function. I still remember very well when I discussed with you about the different functions of language, that language can be a statement, but language can also have its persuasive function. It can have its negotiative function. It can have its suggestive function. It can have its ordering function. it can have its instructional functions. So those are the functions of language. I will just give you an example, which I always love to. The classic example is the cliffs are over the edge of the hill. So that is a statement from the aspect of language as structure. That is a statement. The cliffs are at the edge of the hill. The cliffs are at the edge of the hill. That is a statement from the grammatical perspective. But if we look at it from the importance of language as function and communication, that particular statement can be a suggestion for an outing. The cliffs are at the edge of the hill. Or it can be a warning. The cliffs are at the edge of the hill and therefore don't venture forth. Or it can be a piece of information that you're tourists coming to Shillong and I tell you that the cliffs are over the edge of the hill. So this particular statement, the cliffs are at the edge of the hill, can function, as different purposes, as a suggestion, as an information, as a statement, and even as a warning. So that is what we mean when we're talking of the theory of language. And this theory of language will determine the kind of theory of learning that we adopt. If we believe that language is just a system of structures, we will abide by the theory of learning that, learning is simply conditioning the learner, and therefore we give them sentences, we ask them to memorize, we drill in them till those sentences become a matter of a habit. So this is the way we wash our face, this is the way we walk to school, this is a cat and that is a rat, those are trees and these are books. We condition them to learn, they learn these set phrases by heart, and they're not allowed to really change the structure because they are supposed to be just receiving the information. Whereas when we look at theory of language as function and communication, and we look at the theory of learning as something that deals with our cognitive processes, then we take the sentences and we rebuild on them, we renew them, we redo them. That is when we have the ability to modify on them. So that is the theory of learning, which takes into account our mental processes at work. So that is then a very brief history about teaching, about learning. Now, we will go on to the next slide, which talks about, the traditional approaches. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the traditional approaches. Some of us have been taught English. Since this is a workshop for English language, we're talking about the teaching of English. Most of us, or many of us, or some of us perhaps, have learned English through the grammar translation method. And now with the NEP focusing on the importance of the MT of the mother tongue till class 6, perhaps I say, we would have to go back to the traditional approaches of learning a second language or a foreign language. So we have, I'm just going to point to just the important methods which come to mind at the moment. So the grammar translation method, we have a series of statements, a series of words in a bilingual form where we have to memorize and retain these words for future use. So in a very brief way, that is the grammar translation method. And when we're talking of the grammar translation method, the structures there are very important. Now that passed, and most of us, many of us, I think the majority of us have learned English through the direct method. Now the direct method gives importance to speech. It gives importance to an immersion into the language. And therefore in schools, we were taught to sing in English, we were taught to read in English, we were taught to talk in English. So we were immersed in the language. And that is what we understand by the direct method. I will not bother to go on into detail about that, but we also have a very important method in those days called the audiolingual method, where we received information, we listened and we spoke. We listened and we spoke. So it's something like, here we go around the mulberry bush, twinkle, twinkle, little star. And then this is the cat that killed the rat, that ate the mouse, and so on and so forth. Or Jack and Jill went up the hill. So we listened and we repeated. But again, when it comes to learning, it's still that repetition, it's still that drill, it's still that memorization, till that memorization becomes with us a matter of a habit. So those were some of the traditional, conventional approaches of how we all learned language. There are many more, but I'm not going to list them. These are something that we have to remember. It stands out: the grammar translation, the direct method, and the audiolingual method. And then come the 1970s, we have something called the designer methods. Now, these designer methods are a little bit of a modification to the earlier conventional traditional method, because they talk about a community language learning. You see, so I've just drawn, I had that little clip art over there. I don't know whether it's appropriate, but you know, language learning or the classroom has been conceived as a kind of a fellowship, a kind of a sharing, a time of sharing, a time of talking, a time of interacting. So that is what is community language learning. And each classroom it's also called, you know, behind the community language learning, the theory that talks about community language learning is called the tribes theory, TRIBES, the tribes theory. And so when you're talking of tribes, you're thinking in terms of fellowship, you're thinking of terms of sharing, you're thinking in terms of collaborating. So when a classroom is a community, there's a lot of interaction taking place. There's a lot of communication taking place. And of course, we have another designer method, which is customized, called the silent way, the Suggestopedia, you know, where, you know, the syllabus, I talked about the real syllabus over here. It's a syllabus that emerges from the classroom situation. So it's not a class, it's a syllabus that has been implemented, that has been given to you, and you are supposed to be following that syllabus. Now, in the designer methods of the 1970s, you have an emerging syllabus, a syllabus that emerges out of the classroom situation, the classroom needs, the classroom requirements. Now, that is the kind of syllabus that is being followed. And of course, you have still under this particular method, these methods, you have the total physical response, where not only do you learn verbally, do you practice your structures, but you also use your body language. So the other day I gave you the example of this is the way we wash our face, and this is the way we brush our teeth, this is the way we comb our hair, this is the way we drink our milk. So the teaching is the teaching of the structures, the teaching of the verbs, the teaching of the nouns are accompanied by the body language. So that is the total physical response. Of course, we have many problems to these designer methods. We have the problem of a large classroom. We'll be talking about that. The constraints of having a community language learning environment. We have the constraints of the materials, of the items and the inputs required for Suggestopedia. We have the problems of space. We have the problems of an overcrowded classroom to talk about the total physical response. And of course, we have under this same banner, the natural approach to teaching a language. Now, what do we mean when we're talking of natural approach? Now, this is very much consistent with the interactive pedagogy that we're going to talk about. Now, in a natural approach, we talk about language learning a second language or learning a third language as synonymous with the learning of a first language, how we acquire a first language. So first of all, when we're talking of acquiring our first language, there are no efforts at all in acquiring a first language. The environment that we are in, the situation that we are in, the context that we are in exposes us to the language. And that is why the other day I talked about babbling. That is the first stage in language acquisition. So we babble. We use the bilabials, the pers and the bers to try and communicate with the people around us. And then, of course, we have the one-word stage and the three-word stage. And by the time we are 5, we are complete with a sentence. Now, that is the natural approach. So what these practitioners and these pedagogues are trying to tell us through the natural approach is that even in language learning, we can follow the natural approach of teaching in a very simplified way, in an effortless manner, in a manner that is not really forced, in a manner that is very natural to acquire or to learn a second language. And therefore, we can talk about this natural approach of teaching. But let me tell you, my dear participants, what is something important that we should remember here is that there are two concepts related to the natural approach. One is the root and the rate. Now, the root may be the same between the first language and the second language or the third language, but the rate may be different depending upon the aptitude of the learner. So we have to take into consideration the individual difference between one learner and the other. One learner may have an aptitude for language, and therefore language learning comes very naturally, comes very spontaneously. But some others may not have an aptitude for language, and therefore they approach the language with a certain amount of effort. So it becomes a little difficult for them. Therefore, at this stage, I want you as teachers to remember not to take your students for granted. There are some who have an aptitude for language, and therefore, as I said, they can also be polyglots. Polyglot is a person who has a command of several languages. So there are some people who can really pick up languages naturally, and it comes very automatic with them. Whereas there are some people where language learning becomes a little difficult, but it requires a certain amount of an effort because they do not have the language aptitude. So a learner may have a mathematical aptitude, a learner may have a scientific aptitude, but may not have an aptitude for language. Whereas others may not have a scientific aptitude, may not have an arithmetical or a mathematical aptitude, but they may have an aptitude for language. So my dear teachers, if you find that your learners are very slow in picking up a language or are very hesitant in using the language, please do not misunderstand them. They are struggling. And there is what is called the silent way as part of this method. You know, in the silent way, the teacher does not speak. You know, he encourages or she encourages the learners to speak. So the teacher is silent. Whereas in the grammar translation method, in the direct method, in the audiolingual method, the listeners are the passive recipients. In the silent way, the teacher tries to minimize his or her talking, which means that he or she encourages the learners to speak and to interact. That is the foregrounding for what is called the interactive approach to pedagogy. So where we encourage our learners. But as I said, please remember that in the classrooms, there are students with different aptitudes, and therefore as teachers, we should not be taken for granted. Why is this child not understanding grammar? Why is this child not following the structure? Why is this child always making the same mistakes? There are reasons. We would have to find out what is the reason for this. Perhaps the child is very slow when it comes to his learning or her learning of a language. And therefore, we have to empathize. We should be ready to sympathize. We should be ready to encourage and help that particular child or that particular student. Now, we have the beyond method or the informed approach, where we talk about, you know, the communicative language teaching. This is part of the informed approach. Now here we move away from the teacher-centric, the teacher-centered teaching to a learner-centered teaching. And that is where the interactive approach comes in, where we change our roles as teachers. We are no longer the informants. As teachers, we are no longer the people who give inputs to the students. We are the facilitators of their learning. And therefore, under an informed approach, we have a communicative language teaching or communicative language learning. Let me tell you a little bit about this because I think many of you, or perhaps some of you, have heard about this. Now, in communicative language teaching, grammar certainly is important. The core grammar is certainly important. But in this particular approach, it's meaning that is important. It's meaning that is being focused. So a student should be encouraged to speak. A student should be encouraged to write from the very beginning, even if he or she writes in incorrect sentences. He or she should not be penalized when he or she is trying to write, is trying to speak, because what is important is the message. What is important is the meaning. Can the child or the student deliver the meaning across to the listener or to the hearer? He or she may not be using accurate grammar. He or she may not be using accurate structures, but we should be tolerant. I remember attending a conference where this particular person talked about teaching of grammar with compassion. That is what we mean. When we're talking of communicative language teaching, we're talking about compassion. We're talking about the ability to empathize with our students who are struggling with the structure of the language. So meaning is important, and it is a learner-centered instruction. Now, the other day, we'll be talking about this a little later, though, I had a question from one of the participants as to how we encourage students to speak. Now, that is where the interactive approach comes in. Because we should remember that it is the learner who's learning. We are just facilitating, we are helping, we are encouraging. Sometimes we penalize students. And I remember the other day somebody talking about the red color of the pen, and I fully agree because I also abide by that. That, sometimes our feedback to our students can be very discouraging, and therefore students will shy away from sharing. Students will shy away from talking. Students will shy away from us because they are afraid. They are scared that they would be penalized. So we should remember that this informed approach talks about an approach where the learner is given the importance. It is learner focused. Now, the techniques that we as teachers adopt in the class should account for the learner's needs, their learning styles, and their learning goals. That is why when I started with this discussion, I talked about the real syllabus and the techniques of the teacher in the class. Now, we can be given a method, but what is important for the teacher in the classroom is to modify, to kind of change the kind of methods and the strategies and the techniques that we use in order to help the learners' individual needs, their learning styles, and their goals. And of course, we can do that by encouraging interaction in the class. There are times the students may not want to share their problems with their teachers. The students may be more comfortable sharing their problems with their peers. And what do we do when students talk to the other student in the class? We penalize them. Of course, this is not possible nowadays, but I remembered when we talked in class, we were punished. We were made to stand on top of the table, or we were made to stand outside the classroom, or we were made to stand at the corner of the classroom. Why? Because perhaps I was trying to kind of understand the problem from my peer, from my friend. Now, I remember writing a paper called "The Language Classroom is the Talking Classroom." We should encourage talking as much as possible. And as I said, a student may not come up to the teacher to talk, to discuss his or her problems, but certainly the child will be more comfortable sharing and talking about his or her problems or his or her misunderstandings of the instructions given by the teacher with his or her peers. So the techniques in a communicative language teaching approach or an interactive approach will give some kind of a space to the students to talk to their peers, to talk to their groups, to talk to and encourage this pair sharing and pair thinking and pair collaborating. It's very important. And therefore, it allows such an approach allows for student creativity and innovation. We almost always take our students for granted. We consider them as idiots, as morons, as stupids. But you give a task to a child and you will be so surprised that the child can come up with so many things. Even when it comes to poetry, you know, literature is open to interpretation. Sometimes we go into the class, dictate notes that are as old as ourselves. I've seen this happening. We as teachers go to the class and those notes that we had been given when we were in college, the same notes are being shared with the students in the class for a poem or a novel or a piece of prose. We do not allow that creativity. We do not allow that innovation. We do not allow the students to think. We give them the stereotype notes. We give them as I said, the age-old notes that has been in our collection. Now, we should allow for creativity. We should allow for innovation. And how can we do that? We can only do that if we allow our students to participate. We can only allow that if we allow our students to interact with one another and, of course, with the teacher. Now, therefore, you know, such strategies in the classroom will enhance a student's sense of competence and self-worth. You know, as I talked to you the other day, that everyone has a sense of dignity, even if it be our students. They have their own sense of dignity. They have their own sense of self-worth. And how do we see the self-worth in them? How do we see the self-dignity in them? It is when we allow them to really give us the inputs that they have, the inputs that they know. That will give them a chance to really make use of their creativity and the innovations in them. And therefore, you know, we should give students a chance of organizing the content. We should give them a chance of generating examples. We should give them a chance of sharing anecdotes. We should give them a chance of sharing illustrations and examples. We should give, you know, and asking questions, you know, very, very important, the way we ask questions. The other day, I think when we were talking of eye contact, I did tell you that the way a teacher controls the classroom is through eye contact. And this comes very handy when we ask questions, when we use elicitation techniques. Now, elicitation techniques are also very important in the classroom. You know, how do we hold the students within our fold? It's by asking questions. But the way we ask questions is also very important. You know, the other day, I think I mentioned if it was this group to another group of participants, I don't remember, but I did say this, that sometimes as teachers, we have this weakness of asking questions to a particular child or particular student, and we do not give the chance for the student to reply to our questions. And if this child cannot, we immediately move away to the other child. And if this other child cannot, we immediately move away to another student. Now, that is absolutely not encouraging. We should give the child some time to think. We should give the child some time to really understand what the question is all about by giving the child some cues, by giving the child some clues, by giving the child a hint, by helping them, motivating them, encouraging them, urging them to talk. Now, that is the tenet of interactive pedagogy. It should not be a one-way communication. And as I said, children are timid, children are shy, children are nervous. And so when we throw questions at them, these questions should be followed by certain kinds of cues, certain kinds of clues, certain kinds of hints to encourage this child to speak out or to speak up. So it's very, very important to really encourage the child even when we are asking questions. Now, the communicative language teaching approach is an umbrella of many other methods that fall into the communicative approach, where the main focus is on interaction, where the main focus is on communication, where the main focus is on talking between the peers, talking between the students and the teacher. Now, there is what is called, a method called cooperative language learning, or cooperative learning, or collaborative learning. This is very important. It makes maximum use of the cooperative activities that we can think of in the class. So I've heard many complaints from teachers about this. But when you have that negative feeling in you, if you have a stumbling block in front of you telling you that this is not possible, well, you can never improve. But my dear participants, never put something as a stumbling block. When I'm talking about cooperative learning, when I'm talking about collaborative learning, I'm talking about pair work. I'm talking about group work. I'm talking about sharing problems among the students. The answer that I get from most of my participants over the years is that we have a big classroom. What do? We have no seating arrangement that are feasible for pair work and for group work. My dear teachers, if there is a will, there is a way. There is no problem for you making the students work in pairs or in threes. Or if you have a fixed classroom where you have fixed chairs or benches, if it's chairs, very good, you can use those chairs. But if you have benches, that does not prevent you from using those set benches as a means for group work. You can make the students turn around. The student sitting on one side of the table can face the other student sitting on the other side. So it's just our ability as teachers to think of creative techniques, to think of using the best that is in the context without complaining, without putting the stumbling block first. I cannot do this. It's not going to work. I have 70 students. I have 120 students. It's not going to work. Now, my dear students, dear participants, if you want your students to be involved in what you're doing, if you want your students to be involved in the learning process, you should give them the responsibility. I always tell this to my teachers. Instead of you talking always, instead of you, getting out of breath, talking and sharing, why don't you give that task to your students? By doing that, you are building in them the skills of listening, the skills of talking, and the skills of communicating. I'll just give you an example. Now, even if you're teaching sociology or history or geography or a prose piece or a poem, what you can do is, as I said, you can divide the lessons into their paragraphs. So each lesson can be divided into its paragraphs. So I'm sure there would be 10 paragraphs in a lesson, or even 15 paragraphs in a lesson. Now, instead of you explaining, spending your energy and wasting your energy, explaining to the students, why don't you give a pair or a group of 3 or a group of 4 students each paragraph for them to read, and then ask them, what is the paragraph talking about? That way you're putting your students within your control, having the students within your fold, giving them a task to read, giving them work, giving them responsibility, and believing in them that they can do it. So you give each group a paragraph. Maybe if it's too large a class, you can give maybe 3 groups a paragraph. Let them come up with what is the topic sentence in that paragraph. Tell them that there is no paragraph without a topic sentence. There will always be a topic sentence to a paragraph. There can be no paragraph without a topic sentence. So they have to find out where the topic sentence is. And once they find the topic sentence, it's like a treasure hunt. Once they find the topic sentence, they can summarize it in their own words. They can summarize the topic sentence in their own words. Now, that is what is going to encourage them to talk between themselves, to discuss, to read. Then you're giving them tasks. You're building up their skills. Unconsciously, you're building up their skills. So this is what we call cooperative learning. This is what we call collaborative learning, where it's the teamship that is important. It's the team loyalty that is important. They're helping one another. It's not a matter of competition that I should get an A or I should get a 9 out of 10 and the others should get 4 or 5. That is not education. Education is when we come forward to help one another. Education is when we are willing to support one another. And between the peers, they are supporting one another. They are helping one another. They are encouraging one another. And I'm telling you, my dear participants, I have almost 42 years of teaching experience, and I found that this really, really helped. It helps the shy and the timid students. It helps the slow learners, because they will not come to me for solutions. They will not come to me for help. Even if I tell them I need to explain, I will be ready to explain this twice or thrice. If you do not understand, they will never come to me, because there is a barrier. There is a distance between a student and a teacher. But certainly, they will not be inhibited if they have to talk to their peers. They will not be inhibited if they have to talk among themselves. So this is what it means when we're talking of collaborative language learning and cooperative learning. It's very important. It makes use of the maximum cooperative activities involving pairs and group work. In a while, I will be talking about how do we go about grouping students. But this is a learner-centered approach. Remember that we are not important. We always think that we are important. We always think that we know everything. We always think that we are the teacher and therefore we know everything. My dear participants, let me tell you, I think our students know more than we do, but then they do not want to share, because if they share, they will be immediately be put down by their teachers. Sometimes that is what happens. And therefore, they prefer to be quiet. They prefer to be silent. So whether it is a positive input or whether it be a negative input, they should be encouraged to share. This is what I mean by an interactive approach to pedagogy. It should be interactive, because as human beings, our nature is that we are born to talk. We are born to talk. And we may think of ourselves as having been programmed to talk. We communicate. And communication is generally considered to be the primary purpose of language. How do we learn language if we do not talk? How do we learn language if we just listen? How do we learn language if we do not use the language we have learned? How do we improve on the language if we do not really employ strategies to communicate? That is why I keep talking about in my university to my students. I said, this is a university of English and foreign languages. And I should be hearing the students talking in German, in French, and Russian, and Spanish, and of course in English. But unfortunately, we do not hear that. The students talk in their mother tongue. So what is important is we should encourage our students to talk, to use the language, to try out using the language. Even if it's wrong, it does not matter. The other day, we talked about us being a non-native speaker. And as a non-native speaker, we are bound to make mistakes. And I'm sure some of my students who have been there in the university would have heard me say this, that it's not the problem with the learner, it's a problem with the language. English is an irregular language. There is no regularity in terms of its grammar. There is no irregularity in terms of its spellings. There is no regularity in terms of its pronunciation. You see, the other day I gave you the example of subject and object and object and subject. There is no regularity in terms of its spelling. There is no regularity in terms of its grammar. For example, we use the ed morpheme in talk and walked, but we do not use the ed morpheme in go. And therefore, it is gone, it is went. Why can't it be good? You see, so the problem is not with the learner. The problem is with the language. And therefore, as non-native speakers, we are bound to make mistakes in learning such an irregular language. So you see, even if a child initially who's trying to learn English comes up with, I go to the movies today. Well, he's not wrong. She is not wrong. The meaning is correct. she or he has delivered the message. The structure may be wrong. That will need correction slowly, gradually, not immediately. So the structure is incorrect, but the meaning is being delivered. That is what I mean when we're talking of an interactive pedagogy, a pedagogy where we encourage a lot of talking, because we are human beings and we are born to communicate, be it through the verbal language, be it through the non-verbal language. We are supposed to be communicating. So that is the informed approach, an approach that informs, an approach that allows us to be informed. And the objective, of course, is to raise the achievement of our students. By helping them participate, by helping them interact, by helping them be part of that particular lesson, we are allowing them to raise their achievement as students. We are trying our best to encourage and motivate by empathizing with them, by helping them. So the work of the teacher is to help build a positive relationship with the students. We should not be putting down their self-worth and their dignity and their self-respect. So we should encourage a very healthy social, psychological, and cognitive development. Social, healthy social. They should be interacting with their peers. They should be interacting with one another, and we are there to monitor. We are there to facilitate. We are there to encourage. We are there to help. And we should, of course, boost up their psychological image, not by putting them down. They may not be able to speak correct English, but that does not mean that we should not encourage them to speak. If it is a homogeneous classroom particularly, you can even allow them to use their mother tongue. That is important. If you have a homogeneous group of students, if the child is not able to translate his thoughts or her thoughts into English, if it is a homogeneous classroom, and if you as a teacher understands the language of the child, please help her, or please help him, or please request the peers to help him or her translate his thoughts. Just do not put the child down. That is very, very wrong. So we should be replacing, in such an interactive pedagogy, in such a pedagogy, we should be replacing the competitive organizational structure of most classrooms with team-based, high-performance organizational structure. Now, didn't I talk about this? It's team loyalty. That is what I always talk about in my classes. I said, please do not talk about competition. That will happen. But what is important for you is the satisfaction that you get when you are able to help your friend improve. I remember we had a student, who, when he joined the university, was not really able to understand what is happening in the lecture, in the classroom. But through his peers, through his work with his other students, with the work with the other students, where they translated for him, they helped him to interact, they helped him to communicate. You will not believe it. This boy now is a teacher educator. He's done very well. He really passed very well, and he now is a teacher educator. And he still says, it is because of my team. Now, that is what we want to hear from our students, not competition. I should get in, a friend should not know what I'm doing, and therefore I should be learning only for myself. Now, that is not the true spirit of education. The true essence of education is teamwork, team loyalty, team help. That is very important. And I reiterate again, my dear participant friends, that over the years, I have realized that this teamship is very, very effective. It does help. It does help to improve the other person. A participant the other day had talked to me, had asked me a question: how do you encourage people to talk? Well, I cannot encourage a person to talk. The person is an introvert by nature. The student is not outspoken. The student is timid. The student is shy. The peers will be the ones to push him up. The peers will be the ones to pull her up, to give her that confidence, to give her the courage. And that is what interactive pedagogy aims at, to build up the communication skills of the particular student and of the students. And so the objective of a interactive pedagogy is to provide learners develop successful learning and communication strategies. Now, communication strategies are very important. There are different ways by which we can communicate. The other day, we talked about how we may not be able to express ourselves in words, but there are other ways we can express ourselves. Now, I remembered, I don't know whether this is relevant here, but I remembered when I was teaching in a college many years ago. And the question, of course, the question was a little very funny, but I would like to draw your attention to the question. And if you are some who are involved in question setting, please never use a question such as this. Draw a pen picture of so and so. Now that's very clear. Draw a pen picture of so and so. And you know what happened? When that particular question was given in the examination, in the selection test, to my amazement, I really got a pen picture of the particular character. Maybe this child was an artist and she could represent, the kind of character that this person had in the text through drawing. Well, I called this child to my office and I said, okay, now what is this? I did not reprimand her. I did not scold her. But then in a very gentle, humorous manner, I asked her, what is this? Didn't you understand the question? Now, this was her reply. Ma'am, I'm an artist. I cannot express myself in the language. And therefore, I thought that this was the best way I could represent my thoughts. Isn't that beautiful? She represented her thoughts through a drawing. Of course, for the examination purpose, that will not suffice. But in a classroom context, that will do. This child was able to convey the meaning of the text through an art form. And of course, later on, I explained, I helped out, we had remedial lessons with her, and she was able to manage the question later. But then, mind you, my dear teachers and participants, that was, a very stupid way to form a question. I think tomorrow you'll be looking at a little bit on how you prepare your questions. Now, draw a pen picture of so-and-so is a very clear question. I would myself draw if they wanted a pen picture. So it's we have to think about how we phrase our questions. We have to think about how we make the questions comprehensible to our students. It's very, very important. And therefore, an interactive approach to pedagogy aims at the development of a successful learning. What we're doing right now is just teaching. We're not really involved. We're really not interested in learning. Because when students produce the notes given by us, when they memorize the notes and reproduce it for their examinations, that is not learning, my dear participant friends. Learning is when these students are able to paraphrase, to summarize what has been given to them as an information, to summarize it in their own words. That is what is learning. And as I said, grammar is important, but we should be able to empathize, to sympathize with our students in terms of grammar. We have to look at it with compassion. So if the students are able to deliver the meaning through their innovation, through their communication strategies, whatever it may be, even if it's in the broken form, we should give credit to them, not just, producing the memorizing the notes that we give them and then reproducing them in an examination. That is not learning. Learning is when you're able to take in information, processes within you, and then give it back to the other. That is learning. That is why I believe in the theory of learning, which talks about the activity, the work, the processes of the cognitive mind that we have, that we are able to kind of take in the input, think about it, remodify, edit, add, substitute, supplement, and then give it back as output. That is what, to me, is learning. Not the input that we give and we receive the same equal of output. That is not learning. that is when the students are really just trying to satisfy you as teachers. So the question is, if an interactive approach demands group work, if the interactive approach demands pair work, if the interactive approach demands peer work and teamwork, how do we go about doing this? All right, it's a learner-centered instruction. How important are they? We've talked about it, their roles and responsibilities. So they are responsible one to the other. Their roles are important. Each learner's role is important because he or she affects the people in the group. He or she affects the other learners in the group. So each one is responsible. Each one has a role to play. Each one has a part to play in the learning of the other person. Now, if we're talking about collaborative teaching, if we're talking about cooperative teaching, we have to have the basic strategies, the basic knowledge of how do we do it. Now, if you look at that clip art that I've used, it's the same clip art, but what I've done is we have 3 groups over there. Now, grouping is important, and as I said a little while ago, there are some participants over the years in all my teacher training programs. I've heard the same answer again and again. How do we do, the same question again and again. How do I do it? How do we do it with a class of so-and-so? How do we do it when we have students of mixed ability groups? How do we do it when we have students who are timid and shy? Well, we have to know the art of groupings. We have to have the knowledge of how do we group our students. Sometimes what we do is we use numbers, so 1, the odd number, all the odd numbers are grouped together and all the even numbers are grouped together, or we go by roll numbers, by the names in the register. Now that's a very wrong way to do it. Grouping by numbers is wrong, grouping by names is wrong. That's completely not acceptable in interactive pedagogy. In interactive pedagogy, you have to learn the group dynamics. That is where your understanding of the learner comes in. You have to know your learners. You have to know what are their learning styles. You have to know how your learner is. You have to know what is the level of proficiency of your learner. You have to know the psychological, the kind of mental setup that the child has. You can't put all the smart ones together. You can't put all the extroverts together. You can't put all the introverts together. You're not going to get any input out of that. You're not going to get any output of that. But you have to know the group dynamics. You should be able to study your students in the class. You should be able to know them. Not only know them by name. I don't know whether the teachers here use roll numbers to call the attendance, but always maintain a personal relationship with your students by using their names. It's very important. And so you will have to know who is the smarter one in the class, who is the hyperactive one in the class, who is the outspoken one, who is the timid and the shy. You have to think of a way to group these people together. So you can't have all the smart ones together. You cannot have all the slow learners together. You cannot have those with some disability, learning a disability together. No, you should be smart enough to think that this particular group should contain of an equal representation of each one. So you can have the smart learners, you can have the slow learners, the shy ones, the timid ones. You should be smart. It's called classroom group dynamics. You should know your students very, very well to be able to group them. You just can't group them in a very unorganized manner, just for the sake of grouping, just for the sake of pair work. You cannot just do that. From the very first time they sit in the class, you should be able to group them accordingly. So a smart one sits with a slow learner, if it's a pair work. Then you have the shy ones and the timid ones and the outspoken ones, the extroverts and the introverts, those with a language aptitude. So you have a mixed variety group that will really give you a very satisfying output. It will really make your class sessions very, very interesting. And of course, if you're talking of tasks and activities, very often I get complaints from teachers that, they create a lot of noise. There's a lot of disturbance in the class. There is a lot of talking in the class, and therefore the other teacher gets disturbed. The other classroom gets disturbed. But surely you are there as a teacher. You are the monitor. You are the facilitator. So you should be the one keeping in control. You have heard of classroom management done by Dr. Pinsuklin. You've heard of how she builds in a very congenial, very satisfying, a very comfortable learning environment in the classroom. Certainly, you have the experience to do that, and you can do it. Now, you have examples of activities like a round table. You can have a round table discussion if the physical arrangement of the classroom allows it. There are certain classrooms where you have, chairs with those, a single chair with a rest board, where you can bring those into a round table setting. But as I said, if you have fixed chairs and fixed benches, you needn't have to bother about a round table. But you can think about a think, pair, and share activity. Think between pairs and share with the other pair. So think, pair, and share activity. Then you can have again what is called a solve, pair, and share. You give them a problem, let them solve between the pair and share it with the group. Certainly, if you are a creative teacher, and I know each one of you are creative in your own way, you are innovative in your own way, you can do it. Now, the teacher, however, has to have a goal. You have to have a very organized, highly structured, and of course, a learning environment where you can control. Otherwise, it's going to go out of hand. So you have to plan and you have to structure these tasks. You have to know how to assign roles and responsibilities to students. You have to know how to assign, you have to have the know-how of the group dynamics. You have to provide tasks and activities that will challenge your students to think. You should have tasks and activities to challenge your students to reflect and to ponder and to debate and to argue between themselves. And as I said, if you're doing that, you are encouraging in them all the 4 skills. You're encouraging them the listening skill as they're listening to one another. You're encouraging them the spoken skill. They may not be able to talk loud. They will not be allowed to talk too loud. But certainly as they sit together, they share and they listen. And of course, as they read, you're giving them the ability to train in them the strategies of reading and summarizing and paraphrasing. And of course, when they have to write to you a report or they have to write to you an answer, you're teaching them to develop their writing skills. So it is very important, therefore, that as a teacher, you should know your role and your responsibilities as well. You should be, and I said, I have no doubts about that. If we are content with just walking into the classroom and giving out our lectures or dictating notes, that is very, very sad. The argument always is we have to finish our course. We have to finish. Certainly you can finish your course if you give responsibilities to your students. If you give them each a paragraph to discuss and think about, instead of you explaining every line, instead of you explaining every paragraph, instead of you explaining every word, giving the meanings of words, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, and at the same time, you're not building up the interactive skills of the students. You give them some freedom with control. That is freedom with control. You will be satisfied. Your students also will be so thankful to you because you have given them the chance for them to be creative and innovative. As I said, it can be a text from geography. It can be a text from history. Now, I will share something that I did with my class. Now, we were talking about collaborative teaching and collaborative learning and cooperative learning and teaching. I remembered, I realized that, my students always bunked my classes at the Lady Keane College where I taught. They bunked my classes because, especially the science students, because they considered It was easy for them to read poetry. It was easy for them to understand prose. It was easy for them to understand the bishop's candlesticks, but it was difficult for them to understand chemistry and physics and zoology and biology. Therefore, they would stay back behind the library, study their biology and the chemistry and whatever, and would never attend the English class. Now, this gave me a thought. I said, why do not I do something about this? So I met with my colleagues from the other departments, from biology and from zoology and from chemistry. I said, give me a topic which I can use in my English class. So they gave me a topic. Now, this is a topic for biology. This is a topic for chemistry, reporting on an experiment, reporting on, for example, a biology and zoology, you have these reports on experiments and chemistry. I used that as a topic in order to bring the students into my class. So they were learning both the language and they were learning also about the other subjects that they were having problems with. So that way, the class became more exciting. The class became more relevant. Instead of them just listening to Lucy Gray, listening to the daffodils, they found these lessons very, very motivating and relevant. So you see, we have to go out of our way if we have to involve our students in learning, if we have to involve our students in enjoying their lessons and learning the language. Certainly, we can cooperate with our colleagues. Certainly, we can cooperate with our fellow teachers. Then we would find that our classrooms are very interesting. Now, for this, we come to, there's another very important approach that falls within the interactive pedagogy. It's content-based language learning. Maybe some of you have heard it, some of you have not heard it. I've heard about it. It's content-based. That was why I was talking about chemistry. That is why I was talking about biology. The content is from another discipline. The content is from another subject. You see, my dear teachers, you must be thinking, what is this woman talking about when we have to finish our course? Once a month or once a week, you can have this exercise. You can borrow ideas from your other colleagues, from colleagues teaching other subjects, just once a month or even twice a month in order to build up the language competency of your students. It's going to be meaningful. I'm telling you, my dear teachers, it's going to be relevant. It's going to be very, very meaningful. So this is called CBLT. That means content-based language teaching. You can take up environmental studies, bring that into the English language classroom, bring it into your English classroom. Even if it's the literature classroom, you can steal one class out of a month class to take up what is called language teaching classroom. So it's content-based. If you take something from physics or something from chemistry or biology or history, sociology, environmental studies, whatever, you bring it into the language class in order to build up their language ability. And I'm sure your students are going to really be so thankful because you've taught them how to write a report. You've taught them how to write a CV. You've taught them how to write, maybe a summary. You've taught them how to write a paraphrase. They will be needing these life skills because we have what is called English for employability. I'm telling you, my dear teachers, I have heard complaints from many corporate sectors. Students come in with high profile marks. They have a 95% and a 90% and an 85%. But when it comes to writing and drafting, they are zero. And so when we had the meeting in the LTI National Conference, I remembered, these people from the corporate says, please teach our employees how to write. Please teach our employees how to draft a letter because they don't know how to do it. And therefore, my dear teachers, if we are accountable as teachers, we are the ones grooming our students. So just talking about poetry and prose, it's important, it's part of the syllabus, but if you can sacrifice one period a month, one session a month, just to talk to them about the important skills of the language, I'm sure your students will be very, very happy. So that is, in a very short, the, what is called the content-based teaching, which is still part of the interactive methodology. I think I will not have the time to continue with this. I wish I had the time to talk about some more, but yet we will look at the reflections of Widdowson, who is my favorite. Now, where did it go? Where is that? Oh, I've gone to the end of the slide now. How do I do that? It should be up. Where is that slide?
I think you can scroll down right to the end again.
When you're in a hurry, this is what happens, right?
Yeah, we still have time, ma'am. Oh,
I don't have time, Jacob.
we would like to keep you as much as we can. We're learning so much.
Where is it now?
It's coming up. Yeah, there you go. Widdowson.
Can you read that for me, Jacob?
A foreign language can be associated with those areas of use which are represented by the other subjects on the school curriculum. This not only helps to ensure the link with reality and the pupil's own experience, but also provides us with certain means we have of teaching the language as communication, as use rather than simply as usage.
Yes. So, that is so very important, that we have to look at language, not as just English, but as something that is also the other curriculum as well. We should have to skip on this. Again, Noonan says the same thing as Widdowson. It's about the same thing. But I would like to end with this. What method would you, what approach, what do I do? Which one do I choose? Ultimately, we have to choose the eclectic. Combine everything and use the best of everything so that we can really give best to our students. Now, we will have a little bit of activity. You still have time, Jacob?
Yes,
Write down your understanding of yourself, of a teacher. What am I as a teacher? I talked to you the other day about you being the dictator, you being the autocrat, you being a democrat. Reflect. What are you? Are you the dictator? Are you the autocrat? Or are you the democrat in your classroom? Then you can list this down again. Maybe I can take it up when you send me your emails. What are your challenges as a classroom teacher? I've spoken about them a while ago. Now list them in order of your priority. You can take down these, Jacob, they can have the activity. You still have your time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you promote interaction in the classroom? What are your problems? Given an opportunity, what would you do to really promote interaction in the classroom? What would you do? Then reflect on the following. If you were to arrange a class into groups, how would you do it? All right. Then, how do you encourage the following? Encourage shy. How would you do with the following? Encourage shy and timid students to communicate. How would you check disruptive behavior? That was part of the classroom management session. How would you motivate students? And of course, thank you for listening. You can continue with the task, with the work. All right, my dear teachers, but there is no end to creativity. You are all brilliant, creative, innovative teachers. And I know this, where there is a will, there is a way. We can always innovate. We can always help our students to interact and communicate for their good. It's not for us. The satisfaction for us is to finish our course, but have we really built up the competence of our students? That is the question. All right. I will end with that because I have to attend to another meeting. Thank you all. I enjoyed this session very, very much. And I hope it has made some sense. It has some meaningful inputs for you as teachers. Thank you. All the best. God bless.
Ma'am, we sincerely appreciate your efforts to honor the commitment you have made to the workshop. In spite of having an overwhelmingly packed schedule, you have still made time to be with us today. We are deeply grateful to you for the contribution that you've made to our learning process, to the 2 sessions that we've had. We would not want to keep you any longer. We know you need to get ready for the next meeting. So we want to thank you, ma'am, very much once again for being with us today. And with that, we know that if you want to sign out, we regret you leaving us early, but we know that you need to get ready for the next session. So we would like to wish you all the best, ma'am, and may God bless you as you continue serving the many people and many students and teachers around the world, and especially in our region. So with that, ma'am, we would like to wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being with us. And now, my dear attendees, we are gonna put up the link to the quiz. We know that so many of you are enthusiastic and are looking forward very much to the quiz. And I know that those of you who have been attending these sessions for the last 4 or 5 days, you will be able to answer those questions. They're not very difficult questions. They are very easy, simple questions that you can attempt. So right now, our monitor, Career Reba, will be putting up the link to the quiz. Remember, this is not the feedback form. It is a short quiz on the 5 sessions that we've had so far. You have the rest of the evening to answer the questions. We will hope that you will not cheat as teachers. You will do your best to honestly answer the questions that have been put up as part of the quiz. Tomorrow, we're going to put up the second part of the quiz on tomorrow's session and the feedback questions as well. So tomorrow, we will request you to also wait for the link to the quiz and to the feedback form. And so with that, we will be able to combine the answers that you've got and the feedbacks that you will be giving us, and then we will be awarding you your certificates accordingly. Remember, today's quiz is out of 50 marks, and as soon as you hit submit, you will be able to see your marks. And I do hope that all of you will score 50 out of 50, but if not, tomorrow you still have an opportunity to score some more marks on this workshop. So we want to thank you once again for being with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we really regret not being able to put your questions across to our resource person. We regret not being able to have an interactive session with our resource person because of pressing matters that she has to attend. But we do hope that it has been a learning it is a learning process for all of us, and that you've been able to learn something from this session today. So once again, we would like to thank Professor T.K. Harbaman, although she's not on the air anymore. She has logged out to log into another important meeting with the university's Vice Chancellor. We would still like to thank her. And we would like to thank all of you, dear attendees, for being present every single day of our session. You have been our encouragement. You have been our inspiration. And we want to thank you for your keen interest in our sessions and in our workshop. We hope to see you again tomorrow, once again, for the last and final workshop session of this workshop, at least for now. And we hope that we know that we are going to have another wonderful session tomorrow with Dr. Sunita Khongwer. She is an associate professor in the Department of English at Shillong Commerce College, Shillong. And she will be talking about testing and evaluation, a very important part of our job as teachers. After doing all the teaching, after completing all the syllabus, after covering all the areas that we need to teach, it boils down to how much have our students learned and how do we evaluate their performances and how do we test them effectively so that we will be able to help them to progress to the next level. So with that, we come to the end of our session this afternoon. It's almost evening. Once again, I'm going to wish you good evening. Have a very good evening ahead. Stay safe, stay home. God bless you. And we hope to meet, we will meet you again tomorrow, same time, same channel, same moderator, but with a different resource person and a different theme. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Karen Reba. Karen Reba, can you please put up the link to the quiz again so that our attendees will be able to find it in the chat box? Can you put the link to the quiz again some more time so that our attendees will be able to find it easily? So we're going to fill the chat box with more of the quiz. Here is the link going up. I'm going to ask our monitor today to kindly put up the link again once more, so before we sign out, so that we'll be able to attempt the quiz. All the best. The quiz is easy. The quiz is something that you already know, and I know that you will be able to answer them. So here's the link coming up once again, so that you'll be able to find it easily if you've not been able to find it earlier. So with that, I would like to request you, before we sign out, can you please copy the link down and paste it on your browser URL so that you will be able to find it, because once we sign out, you will not be able to get the link anymore. And we do not want anybody to miss the quiz, because it is something that will help you to remember some of the things that we have done, we've covered so far. So please copy the link to your browser and paste it. And then you can get ready working on the quiz. We request you not to cheat, be as honest as possible. And if you don't know the answer, you can guess the correct answer and you will get the results immediately after when you submit the quiz. So thank you so much. You'll be getting the second part of the quiz tomorrow, along with the feedback form. And with that, we will come to the end of our session and of our workshop. So see you again tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless. Nathaniel, can we wait for a few minutes? Some of our attendees are still looking for the link. We'll give them some time, maybe till 5:30 to get the link. Karuriba, you can continue hitting the chat box with the link so that our attendees do not miss it.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Right, in case you missed the link today, we will be putting up the same link tomorrow. You can submit anytime you're done, anytime you finish, you can submit anytime you're done. If you want to take the whole evening to do the quiz, you can do that. If you know the answers already and you want to submit it right away, you can also do that. You have the freedom of time, you have the freedom to complete your quiz anytime you want to. The only thing we want you to do is not to cheat. And this is from one teacher to teachers who are attending the workshop online. So with that, we come to the end. I think we're going to put up the link one more time. Here it goes. We're going to wait till 5:30, and at 5:30 on the dot, we're going to end our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us once again. If you're attending this on a laptop or a computer, you can simply click on the link and it will take you to the browser and to the form. But if you're using a mobile phone, I hope that it'll be convenient for you to use this. You can also click on the link and it'll take you there. Otherwise, what you can do is you can copy and paste the link to your browser, and that will also help to open the form. Right, 5:28. We're still going to wait for a few minutes. Interesting question. We will check your scores today and tomorrow. So we will not be able to tell you the score that you need to get in order to be qualified, but please submit the quiz today, and tomorrow there's another quiz, and then we will tell you the results. Do not worry about being qualified. You can just enjoy the quiz, and we will do our best to help you be qualified for the certificate. Do not worry.